Again, this is all on us, and now Donald Trump is ramping up saber rattling, nuclear saber rattling with another nuclear power. This is the end result of Russiagate. I hope you're happy, all the people who fell for Russiagate.
So recently, Jimmy Dore railed against the Trump administration for escalating the war with Russia. This coming after the recent decision by Trump to deploy nuclear submarines into that theater. He gets into why this is a catastrophe for U.S. foreign policy and why this strikes directly against the veneer of America first. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
That Trump has just sent nuclear submarines towards Russia, and he's threatening the world with nuclear war. So let's listen to what happened.
Being deployed the nuclear submarine.
Oh yeah, well we had to do that. We just have to be careful. And a threat was made and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people. A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people.
So here's the threat that was made. Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia, tweeted out Trump gave an ultimatum to Russia. We got to end this war in 50 days. Then he did another one. We're going to end it in 10 days, or else we're going to sanction you. And Trump's playing the ultimatum game with Russia's 50 days or 10. He should remember two things. This is the former president of Russia saying this, that Trump should remember. One, Russia isn't Israel or even Iran. And two, each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Don't go down the Sleepy Joe road. So that's what Trump is responding to there.
Just get a load of this and how ridiculous this is. This is an escalation of a proxy war with Russia, and Medvedev isn't even involved in the government of Russia anymore. So this is Trump taking dramatic steps to escalate a war that he said when he came into the office he would end within 24 hours. That seems so comical now to think about, but that was a big part of his campaign platform, that he would bring peace there, and actually his rhetoric was pretty good at times. He said, I just want people to stop dying. He said stuff like Biden was weak and that's why that war happened, despite the fact that, hey, it was in his presidential administration that he gave Ukraine arms for the first time in the tune of $400 million worth of Aegis missile systems that Ukraine essentially put along their border, and supplied them with javelins, which he's often boasted about. So this is escalating a conflict that many people voted for Trump to end, and it's not something that should please anyone that supported him for that reason. And there's lots of stuff in the news right now, the Epstein cover-up, the Russiagate release, and this, but this is an item that's kind of getting obscured and lost in the shuffle, even though this again is siding with the neocons, siding with everything that people like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and Keith Kellogg and Marco Rubio would like him to do. And by the way, I don't think you'll hear Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro complain about this whatsoever.
And here's how Lindsey Graham got involved. So Medvedev tweeted that out, and then Lindsey Graham retweets it and says, to those in Russia who believe that President Trump is not serious about ending the bloodbath between Russia and Ukraine, you and your customers will soon be sadly mistaken. You will also soon see that Joe Biden is no longer president. Get to the peace table. So it sounds like more threats from Lindsey Graham.
Just imagine thinking that this will bring about peace, that this won't provoke a hostile response from Russia, just like Ukraine's ploy to bomb their nuclear bombers a few months ago, which, the Pentagon and the U.S. deep state said, hey, we didn't know a thing about, even though that was 18 months in the making, and it is the U.S. that supplies Ukraine with their intelligence. You get Lindsey Graham, such a foolish neocon here, acting like provoking bigger tensions is actually the way to get peace. Well, we have 3 years of evidence, more than 3 years, almost 3.5 years, to show that that's not the way to get Russia to the table. It's not to send them more money. It's not to fund this absurd war in Ukraine that thousands of conscripts are dying in, up to the tune of 1 million by some estimates, just to let Zelensky run wild, suppress political opposition, ban anti-Zelensky political parties, shut down Eastern Orthodox churches. This is nonsense, and it's totally in the neocon vein.
And Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia, responds by saying, "It's not for you or Trump to dictate when to get at the peace table. Negotiations will end when all the objectives of our military operation have been achieved. Work on America first, Gramps."
That's what it was. You called him Gramps.
So this is Trump responding to that. And if you'd like to see me respond to that, you can see me Sunday in Oxnard, California, or in Rutherford, New Jersey, Manhattan, New York, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. But
Great ad.
that seems to be why Trump's saying this and position. So, by the way, think of it this way. The Ukraine war could not have happened without Russiagate, because Russiagate was there to one part of it was to manufacture consent from the American people for a war that they had been planning for over a decade between Russia and Ukraine, meaning NATO and the West and the deep state and the CIA and the military industrial complex and big oil. So they'd been planning this war between Ukraine and Russia, and they needed to get the American people on board, and Russiagate really served a great purpose because he made people hate Russia and Putin and go along with this Ukraine war, which
This is such a good point, and I'm so glad he's bringing this up. Aaron Matei brought this up recently, is that Russiagate actually served a dual purpose. It wasn't just to undermine Trump, though that was one of the biggest aspects of it, but it was also to inflame tensions with Russia. And the deep state had wanted to do this going back to the 90s, going back to 94, when Clinton first decided to expand NATO to the east, contrary to U.S. promises with Gorbachev that we have on record via the minutes that took place in those discussions. But because they've always wanted this since Putin moved into Syria in 2015 and denied the U.S. a regime change operation at that time, which eventually culminated in success in deposing Assad, but that didn't happen until the end of 2024. But after that, Putin became the number one enemy of the deep state. They saw this as an opportunity to milk Americans for money, send wealth from the middle class to the military-industrial complex, line the pockets of Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, and part of that was through Russiagate. That was the other end of this, and I'm hating to say that they've accomplished both of those goals to some extent. I mean, Trump's in office now, so that one wasn't fully accomplished, but they sure did sell that narrative, and the end result is this $200 billion proxy war with a nuclear power.
we normally wouldn't go along with because we started it, the United States and NATO, and then we wouldn't let it end. They had a peace agreement. Putin had a peace agreement with Zelensky a month after the war started, and NATO came in and killed it and said, if you do this peace deal to Zelensky, we'll kill you. So he didn't do it. So, and the whole reason is they wanted to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. They wanted to sell more liquid natural gas from the United States to Europe. So now we're the energy provider for Europe and not Russia, and Europe gets that's all. So you can point a direct line from Russiagate to the Ukraine war and now to nuclear submarines going. And it's ironic that Trump was the victim of Russiagate, and here he is implementing the last stage of Russiagate, which is sending nuclear submarines, threatening nuclear war with Russia.
He's exactly right, and he was always complicit with being antagonistic toward Russia, including in his first term, remember, when he did provide $400 million worth of weapons to Ukraine for the first time, offensive weapons there. He did embolden NATO. He did condemn the Russians for giving Snowden asylum. He did slap on sanctions to Russia after they had taken control of Crimea, after the Crimeans wanted that, by the way, in 2014, by a margin of like 97%. So Jimmy's exactly right. Trump is behaving the same way that the Russiagate hoaxsters wanted him to act. They all have the same policy, and this is true. This is just another escalation. It's the final stage.
That's the ultimate irony here, is that he was the victim of Russiagate. We could never have the Ukraine-Russia war without Russiagate. And now the conclusion of all this Russiagating is the president of the United States threatening nuclear war with Russia.
Right.
That's the ultimate irony here.
Yeah.
And that seems pretty stupid to do it over these tweets. And other people have said on Twitter, hey, why doesn't Trump just ignore Medvedev like everybody else does? Why are you giving this guy so much?
I'll bet because it's not about the tweets and there's something else going on, such as with the war, and this is just like a little outer whitehead of it, you know?
Yeah, this is just an excuse to escalate it. I don't think it's about the tweets. They wanted new excuses to escalate it. They're pointing to this Medvedev quote as reason, but this is something that Trump has long done in his second term. You know, despite saying he'd end that war, he has continued to escalate. He has continued to parrot the pro-NATO, anti-Russian propaganda that all of his political opponents did. And, you know, he duped a lot of people into thinking he was different on this. He's not. He, other than opening up discussions with Russia for the first time, which I thought was a good thing, he's maintained the same policy. They're bankrolling the Ukrainian side of this, despite the fact that a lot of Democrats are still echoing the same Russiagate nonsense. It's so insane. And a lot of his supporters are going along with this and saying it's 4D chess. Trust the Planikins.
Trump needs a win. Trump needs to end the Ukraine war. Russia's not playing along right now because Russia, when they did play along and they signed peace agreements called Minsk 1 and 2, we now find out that those were all a ruse, that NATO and the West and Europe never, ever planned on following those peace accords. As Angela Merkel, the former head of Germany, said, the reason why they had those peace accords with Russia wasn't to have peace, but so they could build up Ukraine's military to get ready for a big war. And so, and then they had a peace agreement. NATO came in and killed it a month after the war started. And so I'm pretty sure Putin's like, all right, well, guess what? You guys, you effed around and now you're going to find out.
Yeah, Jimmy's right, and he was also right about when he talked about the peace agreement that was on the table, and it seems Zelensky was willing to entertain a month into this war in Istanbul, where he got about as good of a deal as he was going to get. He's never going to get a deal like that before, and instead, he has 1 million more deaths, more or less, depending on which stats you believe in. You know, $200 billion of U.S. money down the drain, let alone all the EU money and Ukrainian money down the drain. And it's just not going well for him. He hasn't made inroads into that territory for over a year at this point. They had an offensive in the summer of 2024. It's been pushed back. So we are in the stage where it's just even more senseless than it's ever been.
So as we predicted when this war started with Ukraine, it's going to end however Russia wants it to end. And that's what's happening. And Trump is frustrated because he can't dictate to Putin to stop this war, no matter what he does, because they've screwed over Putin so many times already with their lies and starting this war. They provoked this war.
Yeah, no question about it. We've talked a lot about that on the channel on the events leading up to this, withdrawing from the INF treaty, pushing NATO's borders all the way up to Russia. We wouldn't accept that from Russia and Mexico or Canada for sure. We wouldn't accept them pouring in weaponry to those two countries. We wouldn't accept them, you know, flirting with putting Canada and or Mexico into their military alliance. It's just something no American would accept. So yeah, Jimmy's exactly right. And you know, there is one way that he can get Putin to stop this war, and it's withdraw all aid to Ukraine. A peace deal would have to follow. Zelensky's hand would be forced, as would the EU, and they might be having to take care of their own affairs in Europe for once, instead of the U.S. bankrolling it.
And the lies of the you know, them overthrowing the Ukraine government, them meaning the CIA and NATO, overthrowing the elected president of Ukraine in 2014, doing a coup and installing someone who was hostile to Russia instead of a guy who was friendly to Russia. So Russia's been taking a lot of beatings from the presidents of the United States and NATO and Europe. And he's done. He's like, okay, well, I'm no more nice guy. And so now I'm just going to keep this war going until I get every single thing I want. They already had a peace agreement. I think it was in March of whenever this war started. Was it 2022? They already had a peace agreement. And that's when they send Boris Johnson, NATO sent Boris Johnson to tell Zelensky, stop the peace agreement that they had completely worked out. Completely. So 500,000 Ukrainians didn't have to die. We didn't have to spend $300 billion fighting this war. It could have all been over because Zelensky, the Ukrainians, and Russia and Putin had agreed to a peace agreement. And who killed that peace agreement? Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, and NATO.
Exactly right. Jimmy is so right about this, and I'm impressed how much he knows about it. I've known that he knows a lot about it for a long time, but he recalls these details. The only thing that I'll disagree with him on is the fact that Yanukovych wasn't even expressly pro-Russian. He just wanted neutrality for Ukraine. He just wanted Ukraine as a buffer zone so it didn't have to be entangled in either Russia's affairs or the United States/NATO's affairs and become a war zone. Well, that got thrown out the window once the U.S. participated in the overthrow of that government in the Maidan coup of 2014, and we have evidence from that in the form of Victoria Nuland's call with Jeffrey Piot, who was the Ukrainian ambassador at the time, talking about who had to be part of this new provisional government, which they wanted to stack with people that were adversarial to the Russians from the start. So yeah, Jimmy's right. Just with that caveat, Yanukovych wasn't even expressly, pro-Russian.
That's who did it. So again, this is all on us, and now Donald Trump is ramping up saber rattling, nuclear saber rattling with another nuclear power. This is the end result of Russiagate. I hope you're happy, all the people who fell for Russiagate and didn't listen to me and called me a Putin puppet or a Trumper when I told them the truth about Russiagate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the ultimate irony here is despite the mainstream media narrative, Trump has been pretty adversarial to Russia from the start. Now, he did have some good rhetoric before he supplied them with those $400 million worth of supplies in his first term and aid. And I don't just mean supplies. I mean weapons that could be used for offensive purposes. The Aegis missile system can be outfitted with Tomahawk missiles with an H-bomb attached to them. That is possible. And again, this isn't something the U.S. would accept in Mexico from Russia, for sure. But, he did a lot of things that were bellicose toward Russia, even while this Russiagate scandal played out. And they said this was the biggest scandal since Watergate that he was going to go down for. The fact that Russians had hacked our elections and that Trump was colluding with Russia to essentially act as an agent of Putin from within the U.S. government. This was all garbage. We know it's garbage. The recent releases just reiterate that fact and that there was quote-unquote low confidence in the deep state's ability to ascertain that was actually going on. But Comey and Brennan and Clapper and Obama just went with this. They kept repeating the nonsense that this was some kind of, collaboration scheme when it's not even clear that Putin had a preference in that race. And all the documentation shows that. A lot of people have known that since the Durham report release where, they had briefed Obama and Clinton that this fake scandal would be coming out in the news, and they still went along with it and sold it, and they just didn't think they would go down with it. And hey, I think they're right. It doesn't look like Trump's going to indict or charge any of those criminals. That's the most ironic part of this. And, a lot of Trump's rhetoric during the campaign trail was to end wars. Why? Americans naturally want to end wars. It's not America first, and America first sells. But America first is just rhetoric. It's not being put into action by the Trump administration. We don't just see that in Ukraine. We see that in terms of Israel. This is an Israel first mentality regime. And when it comes to Iran, they launched a new war against Iran, which I don't think we've heard the end of, by the way, because that regime remains. It looks like they got uranium out of Iran, and that was a specious reason to attack in the first place because they didn't have a nuke. And Netanyahu, for all of eternity, will echo the words, they're weeks away from a nuke. Throughout my entire lifetime, he's done that. They're going to do it again. And now Iran has a real reason to fast track a nuke. I would. If I'm an Iranian nationalist, I would do that, especially seeing how the U.S. treats, say, Iran compared to, say, North Korea that has acquired nukes, compared to, say, Libya, where they gave up their nukes and they were overthrown by a U.S.-led NATO coalition. That's where we're at here. So, yeah, great job, Jimmy. I couldn't agree more. I love the fact that he touched on the inflaming of tensions aspect of the Russiagate story, not just focusing on how the deep state, in tandem with the mainstream media, tried to undermine Trump and call him a Russia asset and call him, you know, a traitor, that he would be let off in handcuffs. It was all garbage the whole time. A lot of Americans are finally waking up to that, but Trump's just disappointing people more because he won't indict or charge anyone in those crimes, even perjury, which clearly Comey and Brennan and Clapper are guilty of at the very least, but he also continues to arm and escalate the war in Ukraine. This war is going to go on for a long time. The only way to end it is to disengage. Trump's not willing to do that. And it's telling. It's telling that he defers to the foreign policy preferences of guys like Lindsey Graham over Thomas Massey. It's so telling. But let me know down below. Do you agree with me and Jimmy? Is this the result of Trump falling in line with the deep state? Do you think that other aspects are in play here? And what is your policy preference for Ukraine? Let me know in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Jimmy Dore too. He's awesome, especially great on foreign policy issues like this. And please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you do that, you'll help support the channel, which I appreciate. And in return, I'm going to give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.